Tell as much as you want. I don't know what you want to tell, but
Where do I start? It's something I don't think I've ever said officially. So I will say it officially for Latinish.
why haven't you said it officially before you say it?
I mean, I've told friends, obviously, but you talk about guilt, you talk about shame, and you talk about being different and being
Yeah.
the other. And I'm already like so many others. I'm like the
Right.
other of the other of the
Right.
other. You know what I
Right.
mean? Wow, it's so funny to say out loud.
Polyamory, right?
So I'm polyamorous. Yes.
We've talked about this, and you asked me
Yeah.
about my polyamory, and you're like, why don't you practice it? And I told you because it's not easy to practice it in my everyday life, and to practice it would drastically change my life. And the people that I care about are not down with it. They don't understand it,
And
and
to
they
be
think I'm just
fair,
being a
like
fucking
I don't
philanderer.
practice it like that either. You know what I mean? And there's varying forms of polyamory because there's something called polyfidelity, which is if you're in a multiple group relationship, multiple party relationship, so like three or four, then you close the relationship between the three or four of you. And then that's what that
Which
is.
is weird that
But,
there's all these terms for it because it's just love, right? Everybody's love is different, and there's infinite ways of loving, right? That's basically the moral of the story.
just like there's no one way to do most things, there's
To live
like
your life.
there's multiple ways of loving. For example, Hector, Louis, I can love you in a deep, intense way that
Right.
has nothing to do with sex.
Right.
You know,
Or you can
and there's
love two
like
people and it has something to do with sex, but you love them differently for different reasons, and you get something different out of both of those relationships.
and sometimes it can be like what they call a V, where the two people love the same person, or it could be a full closed triangle, where it's just all the way around.
I think poly belongs in LGBT because even among LGBT, if you're poly, you're looked down upon because fidelity is still the norm.
It's hard because then you make the umbrella really, really large. Because there's also the misconception that people who are polyamorous are also swingers, and that's not
Right.
necessarily the case. There's heterosexual polyamorous people. There are bisexual polyamorous people.
Right.
There are pan whatever. There's also homosexual polyamorous people. So and then there's mixtures. So it's kind of hard to put that under the alphabet soup. This is more of a a relationship orientation. That's the best way to put it. So where does that fit in? You know what I mean? Where does that go? I honestly don't have the answer.
There isn't one really, right? Because it's your situation is going to be unique to somebody else, right?
The first time I had heard about polyamory was my friend was a performer and he was performing at a polyamorous pride event in Central Park in New York. There was a person with polyamorous. I was like, oh, back in my day, we used to call that being a hoe. And that's not necessarily what it is. Now, mind you, you could be a hoe. I'm all about, be a hoe. If you want to
Me
be a hoe,
too.
be a hoe.
I grew up with women. They were my best friends, and they were, we used the word slut, but we used it with pride. I was a male slut, and they were female sluts. They didn't hide it, which I really admired. Guys,
Bloodiness knows no gender.
yeah, because all the guys were, we were fucking all these girls, and we were like the kings of the school. But then if the girls we were hanging out with, oh, they're the bad ones. No, they're just doing. They own their fucking genitalia the same way we own ours, right?
I always found it weird and strange and odd. Like, why is the double standard? Like, why can't, if a woman wanted to, have sex with as many people as she wants? As long as you're not hurting nobody, as long as you're not hurting yourself.
I know men who are male sluts, and they don't really want to be doing it. That's different than being, owning it and you wanting to do it. There's this idea that women don't know how to protect themselves or care for themselves, and anything a man does is not harming himself. He's so wise that he can't do anything that harms himself, which is bullshit.
If you are happy with what you're doing, whether that is having sex with multiple people at a time or at the same time, you know what I mean? I don't care. It's not my business. If you want to be a virgin till marriage, okay, but I'm not one to try to judge you on that because I wouldn't want to be judged on myself. So
Right.
why would I,
I think that's why I'm not judgmental in that way. Like I have opinions of things, but at the end of the day, anybody can do
you have a
whatever.
lot
they-
of opinions on things.
Well, it's just how my mind works, right?
No, it's good. It's good.
But I don't judge, meaning like you shouldn't do that, you blah blah blah. Like I have an opinion on it, but I'm so weird that I wouldn't want anybody to tell me that I shouldn't do X, Y, and Z, right?
It's like I know people in like who are in the kink scene or they're in the leather scene. It's like there may be things I don't understand, but it doesn't mean I should judge it. It doesn't mean I should look down upon it.
Well, that's old school, right?
I shouldn't fear it. I shouldn't fear it because that's where it's coming from. It's coming from a place of fear.
Fear.
I don't want to operate out of fear. I want to operate out of love.
I think it's almost FOMO, right? When somebody sees somebody else doing like having like, say they're into kink or they're polyamorous or whatever, and you're living this heteronormative life, you love your heteronormative life, but then you see these people having fun, having this sexual life. Maybe these people have a FOMO of like, am I doing it wrong? Am I boring sexually? Instead of following or, wondering about that, they say, no, they must be doing it wrong. Whatever I do is right. They're doing it wrong. And so
Persecuting.
it might just be fear, because we're saying it's fear, right? So fear of what? Why would you be afraid of your neighbors are doing whatever the fuck in their bedroom? It has to be FOMO. It has to be like, is my sexual life wrong? Is it boring?
There's a big spectrum of things. You know what I mean?
That's what I'm saying. Like, we need to get rid of labels, period, right? When it comes to love and sex and how people get together, because I don't care how many cubby holes you invent, it's not enough. It's infinite. It's a spectrum. So get rid of the labels.
And there's so many people that I know that started their lives in a heterosexual life, and all of a sudden they went past a certain age, and then they had a same-sex relationship.
The moral of the story, the moral of this conversation is that the way to be unhappy is to force your life into these pre-packaged prescriptions: gay, lesbian, bi, trans, poly. They want to put you in these little boxes, and that's the fastest and best way to be unhappy.
All I would tell people is don't hurt anybody else.
Yes.
Take care of you,
right.
Whatever that means. To quote William Shakespeare, there is nothing good or bad, only thinking makes it so.